Hi, Philip. Hi, let me unmute you for a minute. Turn that off as well. So I'm really excited to invite Phillip Ullman from the Cordant Group. Thanks very much, Philip, for coming to join us today on this webinar. It's fantastic to have you. We're going to be talking about the Cordant Group and particularly how you've sort of transformed it into a social enterprise from a family-run business. For those of you that don't know me, that are joining into your first webinar, if you're watching on the replay, my name's Kat Lecock. I'm an impact strategist and business coach and the host of the Why Social Enterprise Summit. If you haven't already shared it with friends, family, colleagues, then please do share the summit so we can have as many people as possible getting access to these videos and hearing from these amazing experts that we've got joining us throughout 2 weeks. And it'd be really good to have as many people accessing that as possible. So, Philip, as I was saying, thank you very much for joining us. I saw you recently at the Social Enterprise World Forum. I know we'd been speaking before that about having you in the summit, but it was really fantastic for me anyway to get a little bit of a preview of hopefully what some of the stuff we'll cover today as well, and hear about how the Cordant Group has evolved as a business. So to get started, it'd be great if we could just have a little bit of an intro from yourself, a bit of your background, and introduce what the Cordant Group is, and then we'll get into some of the other questions.
Right, yes, I'm Phillip Ullman. I'm the Chief Energizer of the Cordant Group. So that normally raises two questions. Number one, what's a Chief Energizer? And two, who are the Cordant Group? Starting with a Chief Energizer. So my job is to energize the organization. It's about servant leadership. It's not about command and control. It's about creating an environment where others thrive. The Cordant Group was set up in 1959 by my father. It was a security guarding company. I joined in 1996 when the turnover was about 12 million. We employed about 1,000 security officers. In the last 22 years, we've fortunately grown it to a turnover in the last year of 850 million. We're now in recruitment and facility services. Geographically, we're in the UK, Ireland, all over Europe, and in Australia. And significantly, in the last year, we placed 125,000 people in various roles. So we touched a lot of people.
Wow. Yeah, that's impressive. It's a huge organisation. So it's brilliant to have somebody representing such a big business and corporate. You know, for me, that would definitely, it's a sign of a corporate business. And what's really interesting to me is this decision that you took in the last couple of years, I think, wasn't it, to become a social enterprise. So tell us about that. What kind of introduced you to this whole idea of social entrepreneurship, and why did it spark your interest as a business owner?
Well, it starts with the kids. My daughter got married, I think about 3.5 years ago, and we were sitting down, myself and my wife, with the parents of Daniel, my son-in-law now. We were discussing what should Daniel do for a living. Now, while we're discussing what he should do, anyway, we were. That's the way it works in our circles. And 3 out of the 4, he was in his final year of a law degree. And myself, my wife, and Daniel's mother said he should continue to pursue the law degree and become a lawyer and support his family. And his father said, no, he loves education. Daniel was phenomenal with the boys, and he's an inspiring, visionary leader. So Daniel, his father said he thought he should pursue what he loved. Mm-hmm. So I was reflecting on what Johnny, Daniel's father, had said, and I spoke to Daniel at length, and I felt that Daniel was right and I was wrong. And I felt that the important thing is to look at where you can have the maximum impact and do what you love. So that triggered an epiphany. It fundamentally made me look at everything I was doing in my life, and since then I kind of consider myself to be a millennial in the body of a baby boomer. So I think like a millennial, and I'm excited by the impact that business can have on the world outside us. So I was never driven by money, I hasten to add. I've never been somebody who's been greedy. I've always been generous, but I began to recognize that the true mission of business to me should be about social impacts, society and environment. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened.
Fantastic. So, but what was the sort of trigger for you to really think about, no, we're going to kind of change and become a social enterprise, you know, recognised by the social enterprise sector, rather than, because lots of business leaders are thinking differently about the social and environmental impact and economic impact that they're having, the social value that they're having through their business. but they're not taking that quite radical leap to kind of completely transform the way their business runs. So
yeah, when I looked around, I made a decision that I was going to do something which for society. Okay, so then I looked around. In fact, we had a big opportunity in the NHS space, which I discussed with Deloitte, who were advising us, and they said, "Have you considered doing it as a social enterprise?" And I didn't know what it was at the time, so I researched social enterprise, and then I realised this is what I want to do. And to be clear, this is not about CSR. It's not about spin or marketing. It's fundamentally changing the mission of the business. So there's a lot of people who are jumping on the bandwagon of presenting and marketing their business as a social business. And that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about fundamentally changing the business. So the mission is now not to make money for the shareholders. The mission is to change society. And it's a fundamental difference. And that's the only thing to me that's going to make the changes that the world needs. The more I thought about it, the more I've recognised that the world's at a tipping point. So whenever the way information is disseminated changes, the institutions of society have to change. The last time that happened was in the 15th century with the printing press and Gutenberg, and suddenly information could be exchanged in the printed form, and you could suddenly inform people quickly. The power that was at the time with the leaders was disseminated, and that over the next 200 or 300 years resulted in liberal democracy, the Glorious Revolution in the UK, and then liberal democracy, and also capitalism and the Industrial Revolution. So the institutions that we now live with were designed for that era, for where you could come up with an idea to write a book, spend a few months writing it up. It took a long time for information to get disseminated. Now, and that's how liberal democracy works, and that's how capitalism works. But now suddenly we're in a world where you have an idea, you can communicate it with everybody in the world, in theory, in the space of a few seconds. And surprise, surprise, that means that neither the state nor capitalism are fit for purpose. And that's what we're seeing now with the challenges in the UK, with Brexit in America, and indeed with capitalism. So to me, we're at a tipping point where all institutions will have to adapt to the new method of and the speed at which information is disseminated. And for me, that's about social enterprise. It's about redesigning the business to have impact on society, which is what people want.
Mm-hmm. So I'm really interested to explore a little bit more. I'm interested to come back on your point about the shareholders, because I'm interested to know what their response was when you presented this issue to them.
Yeah, it's not been easy. Now, I love my parents dearly, but they were born before the war, and they had to build a success for themselves. My father came from Germany, my mother from France. They started with absolutely nothing. My father left Germany in a rush with nothing, and my mother left France with nothing. So they had nothing. So they had to start by providing money for the family, and therefore my father's 89 now, with 90 in a few weeks. And at that stage, they can't change their mindset. They were born into a command and control world, and they can't change. I don't hold them against them. They just can't. They're in that mindset. Whereas the millennials and the younger generation they're in a different world. They can't accumulate wealth. They can't buy houses. They've been dealt a poor hand, and therefore the world has fundamentally changed. Mm-hmm. And therefore my family still don't understand it. And therefore we are working out a solution. We're not completely there. It's work in progress, but we're well on the way to resolving that. But we love each other. It's not creating anger, but we have to work out a solution that meets all the needs. So it's not been easy.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm sure it hasn't been. I'm sure there's a lot of complexity to changing. It's not like you're a small business, a small family-run business. You're huge, and the operations of that business still have to run smoothly as you go through that transition. So, yeah, I'm sure it's been very difficult and complex. Can I ask again, in terms of, so you said you've changed the mission of the business. Are there other specific things that you've changed on this journey towards becoming a social enterprise?
Yeah, so the first thing we changed was we changed the attitude to distribution. So we've capped dividends. That's an absolute cap. We've capped salaries at 20 times the lowest paid, and we're looking to introduce profit sharing. So that fundamentally changes us from a shareholder, commercially focused organisation into an organisation that is focused on society. Now, that transition can't happen overnight. We have the complete buy-in of all the board, all the management team. They completely buy into it. But 125,000 people is a hell of a lot of people to impact. And let me just tell you, the feedback and the response is phenomenal. So we are now winning. I can tell you now, we are winning business, sizable contracts because of our social mission, even now. That's happening. So that people get this. And I was just in a meeting with some branding consultants that we're working with. And Chris, the CEO, said to me, no, everybody we speak to within the business accepts and understands that what is going to be our USP is the social mission, which this is new. I mean, I'm learning this as we go along. So this is really taking off. So we got the buy-in of the team. I don't know if you've seen Larry Fink's letter to business. He's the biggest fund manager in the world at BlackRock. So he actually said that every business has to have a social mission. So this is happening everywhere. It's happening across the world, and we're also working with people in France. They picked up the change that we were making, and Macron completely gets this, and he has changed the French legislation now, so that a company is now effectively being redefined as a mission with a social purpose for the sake of society and the environment. So that is current legislation which is going through the houses in France, and he's also introducing what he's calling an entreprise à mission, which is a mission-based company which has 3 criteria which are interesting, which is 1, that you have to come up with a social mission. 2, you have to measure impact against that social mission. And 3, you then have to create an advisory board that holds the executive board to account. Now, I think that is key, because the more I speak to people, I think what we're doing here at Cordant, most FTSE directors want to do. But genuinely, that's my impression. They want to do it, but they can't do it at the moment because their hands are tied by the constraints of the market, which again was designed for a different era. It was designed for an era where there was a printing press. It does not fit for purpose. Effectively, they can't change or morph into a social enterprise because the measurement mechanisms mean they have to deliver results for the market. So, but what I'm certain is there is a will there. So if we can follow the lead, and by the way, I'm working with Professor Colin Mayer, who's leading a project for the British Academy, which is on the future of the corporation, and he invited me to join his advisory board, and we're using Cordant as a case study for the process. So this is a project led by the world's leading academics, American and here all over the world, to look at the future of capitalism. And he is a visionary kind of man. He recognizes that Milton Friedman's view of shareholder value being the mission of business is actually wrong. It just doesn't work. So I can see very clearly that we will follow the lead of France. We will change the legislation. And more importantly, we have to get the millennials engaged. This, to me, has to be a bottom-up change. So we have to get the millennials to use their powers in 2 ways. 1, they can choose who to work for, and 2, they can choose what to consume. And a big part of the trouble is consumerism. Yeah. We're in a society where people are buying things they don't actually need because they're persuaded by advertising they want them. So fundamentally, the millennials have to start choosing who they work for and what they consume, and that will then start to influence organizations, to businesses to morph into social enterprises, and it will persuade the government, the state, to change its approach to business and to do the same kind of thing as Macron is doing in France.
Absolutely. And I think actually you've covered lots of different themes there that we've been talking about consistently throughout the other webinars as well. And one in particular around how do we, millennials, all the evidence shows that they are thinking more about who they want to work for, what type of organisations they want to work for, some of them certainly are more conscious about what they're buying, how, you know, what impact those businesses that they're buying from is making. But there's still so much more to do. I think that we can still, you know, not just rely on the millennials to make that shift, but encourage and support their thinking, their education. And I was talking to Rhiannon at the very start in terms of how we, you know, inform and influence the education system as well, particularly business schools, but also any, you know, graduate schemes and things where young people are going, so they think differently about social and environmental missions.
I agree with you, but we have to start that conversation. But there's anger in the millennials, and quite justifiably. And that we've got the prospects of Jeremy Corbyn leading a Labour Party into victory in the next election. There's a significant chance of that. To me, this is happening. So I'm agnostic politically, but I'm quite happy if the Conservatives adopted the kind of policies. At the moment, I'll be honest with you, we're getting more traction with the Labour Party, that they're actually recognising, they're connecting with the youth, and they recognise the change. Hopefully, before the next election, I think this will be the space where the next election is fought. By the way, this space of how do you change both the state and capitalism to focus on the needs of the planet and the needs of people. And I think that this is going to be the heart of the next election. And I'm hopeful that both parties will get engaged and we'll have a genuine conversation about what the future looks like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a couple more questions then. One is around, well, I'm interested because you employ a huge number of people. You're saying over 125,000 people you have employed through your business. So how familiar are they with this concept of social entrepreneurship? Because in one sense, that's a huge stakeholder group for you to have influence over as well as employees.
Yeah, let me just say, we don't employ 125,000 at any one point in time. That's in the 12-month period, because we have a lot of shorter contracts. But we over the year, we employed 125,000. At any one time, it's 30 to 40,000. Mm-hmm. So we just had a discussion earlier this morning. They know the mission is social enterprise. We haven't, by the way, yet rolled this out to the temporary workforce. Our core workforce understand what we're trying to do, but we are working to get the format, the wording clear, because we've got to be crystal clear what we're asking them to do. And we have done the exercise. We know what our social mission is likely to be. Most of it's around good jobs, because that's where our big space is. We employ lots of people, so it's about meaningful work that allows people to lead a meaningful life where they're treated with dignity and respect. But we also are interested in spaces like the NHS, and there are lots of areas that excite us. But we are rolling that out. So it's a journey. We by the end of the year will have done the rebranding exercise. We'll have the words and the collateral to explain to our people exactly what we mean. But I can tell you now that there's no doubt that when we speak to clients now, there's even though we don't know exactly the format it's going to take, there's phenomenal interest. This is happening. Yeah. And over the next few months, the business, if you did a survey now, they'd say, yes, they know we're a social enterprise, but what does that mean for them? They don't yet know. Mm-hmm. They will know that within the next few months. And then we believe this will explode. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that you're getting so much new potential business because of this change. Because, you know, when you're I haven't come across other businesses that are doing this in this way, who are, you know, taking this quite radical shift to become a social enterprise, especially for such a, like we were saying, such a big established organisation and company. It doesn't surprise me that you're getting approached, because, like I was saying, you know, we see lots of businesses, lots of corporates with new leadership, you know, this positive, forward-thinking leadership about a sustainable planet, about how we treat people better, you know, about what the economy needs to look like for the future to sustain our planet and society. And so the opportunity to buy in services from businesses like yours is absolutely a huge opportunity that I know lots of businesses are looking at, and that's certainly what we just talked about in the earlier webinar this afternoon with Social Enterprise UK. So yeah, I think it's fantastic, but you really are at the forefront, aren't you, in terms of doing this work? Yeah, I haven't come across any large organisation morphing from a shareholder focus to a stakeholder society and environment. We've not come across, I don't think there is one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why people are watching what we're doing closely, because we're leading the way. There are lots of people that want to, and even within our organisation, which is, in terms of the governance structure, is relatively simple, it's hard to achieve. Yeah. So if we're there, I mean, the board is fully supportive and the shareholders will be shortly. So effectively, it's hard because the governance structures of organisations do not lend themselves to the kind of transition that we're talking about. This is not a tweak. This is a fundamentally new paradigm. But that's why we need to get government engaged. We need to get the citizens engaged, because it's needed. I think it's not rocket science. It's needed, and I'm certain once we start doing what France has done, which we clearly will do. And think about this, Kat. If every organisation, large organisations, had to publish their social mission, I can see millennials getting engaged in what are you going to do for society? They're not going to leave Tesco's and Amazon, all these organisations, without questioning social mission. I think people will get engaged. We'll start having discussions about what these organisations should do. And I think that discussion will be healthy. So I think that France are leading the way, and I think that others will follow suit. But as you know, the reason why we're the only one is because of the inertia, of course, the resistance to change. You can start a small organisation as a social enterprise, but to change an organisation, in our case, with 125,000 people a year, with thousands of managers, it's not easy. But I think what government will help, and it will happen. But hopefully people will monitor what we're doing and hopefully learn from our lessons.
Yeah, well, I can only congratulate you for being first, because I can imagine it's not easy.
Thank you.
So well done. I'm really interested. So I know you're kind of in the process of developing what your new social mission is. You haven't necessarily, finalised it yet. But what are you hoping the social impact is that you're going to have? Obviously, you said you're going to focus on people and the employability side of things. But what's that really going to look like for you as a business?
Well, we think the whole recruitment marketplace needs to change. At the moment, well, more than that, employment needs to change. It's as big as that, because only 10% of workers are connected to the job they do. This is across you've got about 25% actively disengaged, and the balance is 65% not actively engaged. In simple terms, that means people aren't enjoying their jobs. Yeah. And that means that they're not leading fulfilled lives. So the journey is towards enabling people to find the right career, which is not simply driven by, I'm going to make a certain amount of money. It's driven by, where can I have the greatest impact? What do I love doing? So the idea is we touch a lot of people. There are not many people that influence 125,000 people each year. So we want to work with employers and candidates in a completely new way. We want to move away from being agencies, whereby we sit between the candidate and the employer as a middle person, to a much closer relationship where we coach. So we take ourselves out of the intermediary role into a matchmaking role, where we understand the needs of the candidate and understand the needs of the employer, and make matches in a completely different way, using technology in a completely different way. So we're looking at a completely change in the way recruitment works, and in general, so that people can lead more meaningful lives. In terms of at the NHS as well, we're excited about the prospects of working with the government in due course on that sector. The NHS is a phenomenal organisation, but again, it's struggling because of the history, because of the governance structure, which doesn't give enough freedom to the able and devoted people within that organisation. We've got lots of exciting ideas about how that space can be changed for the benefit of society, and we're keen to work with others in the NHS to make that work, and that's exciting. So we're setting the bar very high, but we feel the time is right.
No, absolutely, and I think that's so needed, the transformation in recruitment, and thinking about what work is, what meaningful work is. How do you find something that you're passionate about, or at least can engage with on a day-to-day basis? Because we spend so much time at work, it needs to be something that you're passionate about, or at least feel like you're making a difference.
Absolutely, that's the key. You've got the key word is, am I making a difference to others?
Yeah.
And most people, if not all people, make the decision they graduate or they leave school, and they've got certain financial requirements. They want to put food on the table, understandably. And the decision is made, they look for a job and they find the job which meets the financial needs. Yeah. And I'm saying, no, like my son-in-law Daniel, that's the wrong paradigm. That doesn't lead to a fulfilled and meaningful life. It leads to a life that 90% are not engaged in what they do. So we have to change the framework. And I think the millennials are up for it, but the system doesn't allow that. So to me, we need to change the way we recruit, the way we treat people. The way I describe it, I'm starting to talk about a different form of relationship. We're used to contractual, the two forms of relationship. There's contractual and covenantal. Mm-hmm. In a contractual relationship, I have my interests, you have your interests. I give you money, in exchange you give me a service or a product, but I'm fundamentally competing with you. We're not working together, and that's where society is now. That's where business is. It's a zero-sum game. It's about me persuading you to pay more for a product you probably don't even need. Whereas what we need to move to is a covenantal relationship, whereby I have my own identity. So I'm not a thing. I'm a person with beliefs and values that works together with someone else who has who's another who has their own identity, their own beliefs and values, and we work together to achieve together what we can't achieve separately. It's a completely different concept. It's about people, humanity. It's about collaboration for the common good, rather than competing for myself. It's fundamentally moving from I to we, and it's that scale of change. But I think it's needed, and I think it's happening.
No, definitely, and I certainly welcome it, because I do a lot of work in schools and meet a lot of young people, and yeah, often have those conversations around. Well, it's more so that, you know, and I think this happens as we grow up into adulthood, and often people are, you know, and the way the recruitment system works is very much based on, well, what qualifications or skills or experience have you got, which is important. I'm not trying to say that that's not important, but I think that's often missed is, you know, the personal qualities, the personality of somebody, whether they're the right fit for your organisation, whether they've got the right attitude and values that your organisation has. It's been really interesting working with thousands of kids over the last 6 years or so in schools across the UK, and having those conversations with them about what is it you really want to do, like what are you really super excited about, not so much what career do you want to have, because I don't think careers exist in the same way these days anyway. I mean, I'm a little biased because I've had a very, not a straightforward career. I've gone and done things that I'm passionate about. And
you and me both, by the way.
Yeah.
I did the same thing when I started my career. I had loads and loads of jobs. I like you, because I wanted to find something I loved. Yeah. But what we're both saying is there's nobody advising students or pupils in their interests.
Yeah.
We, as an agency, are looking to make a commission. That's the way the model is. It's all transactional. It's not relationship based. It's transactional. There's nobody advising these kids, coaching them as to what they should do, and it's impacting their lives. It's not just, by the way, at the point where they transition from education to the workforce. It's also in education. We're not. There's so much that kids love to study, and we're not giving them an education they love. It's still based on a production line. We still live in a world where the education system is based on the Industrial Revolution. It's a production line with an hour maths, an hour in physics. And again, it's not integrated. It's not contextual. It's not experiential, and it's not bespoke.
Yeah, it doesn't meet kids' needs often either. And I've got just because I know we talked about this before, Philip, before this webinar, and I think we did anyway. I've got a memory of it, sort of talking about Ken Robinson, and I just wanted to highlight that for anybody that's interested in this kind of education area more generally. Ken Robinson's a great global speaker. He's one of the biggest TEDx speakers who talks on this topic specifically. So just encourage people to look that up if you're particularly interested in this area. But I remember going into school in the last 18 months and talking to a child who was completely disengaged. And when I kind of got talking to him, he was just like, well, miss, I'm rubbish at school. I haven't got any interest. I'm not really good at any subjects. And so I was like, because this is what I do, I was like inquiring, well, what is it that you're interested in? I don't really care about whether you're interested in school or not. What is it that you're interested in, what to enjoy doing? And for him, he just said, well, I'm passionate about he didn't say it in this way because he was 11, but I'm passionate about computer games. And when I got talking to him about that, you really could see that he was really, really good at computer games. And so I sort of, encouraged him, well, there are all sorts, it's a huge industry, it's growing in the UK, so there's huge opportunities. I know there's massive skills gaps because I've got friends that work in that industry who are constantly recruiting. And encourage him to say, I appreciate that gaming might not come up much in your subjects at school, but if that's what you're passionate about, make sure that you work towards the gaming industry, whether it's in design, whether it's in development, whether it's in all the different areas that work in that. And it's, like you were saying, it's thinking outside of that very rigid structure that we do have in education at the moment, and we have in industry and recruitment around, there's a funnel for you and you need to go down this funnel or you need to go and do it this way.
Yeah, and then what we need to, as Simon Carr talks about, we need to flip the education system. We need to use the technology to allow people to have a bespoke education. It's not by technology, because what you should do is almost the preparation for the lesson becomes the lesson. So if I'm lecturing to you, there's no point doing it face to face because it's a waste of time. So that lecture, which is fixed format, should be pre-recorded. The pupil should have that watched before the session, and the teacher has to become interactive. And I think we talk about, I haven't mentioned Lulu, but again, self-managing teams and people working together in groups, I think works in education as well. I can see a situation where we start dividing the class into groups of 10 to 12 kids, and this is, by the way, done in parts of the world, who work together to be educated. The teachers facilitate, but what should happen is that the kids should help each other, because that's what we need in the real world, and get the kids excited by education. And I'm certain the model will work because they will take responsibility for each other, which is what we need in a covenantal society. You're not just responsible for yourself, you're responsible for others. And if we can get education working in that way, it will then follow through to we need to complete, as you say, transformation of institutes to make them fit for an era where technology allows information to be communicated instantaneously, and we can pre-record videos, all that stuff. We have to change society and institutions to meet the new world that we live in.
Absolutely. And Phillip, I want to come back to something you mentioned right at the beginning around servant leadership, because for lots of people might not have come across this term, but I know it's really significant to the way that you lead your organisation. And so I just wondering if you can give a bit more light on what you mean by servant leadership.
Yeah, so to me, let me summarise. If anybody's interested in the concept of the way organisations need to be re-engineered, there's a guy called Fred Lelou. I'm not sure whether you've read the book, Kat, but it's Reinventing Organisations. There's 2 versions of the book. There's a short version, illustrated guide, and he studied a number of organisations that have made the transition from what he calls a fear and scarcity paradigm, which is, I think, where most of us are, to a trust and abundance paradigm. So we have to start trusting each other. We don't trust many people at the moment. That's the problem. We don't trust politicians. We don't trust business people. There's a lack of trust in the world that we live, and that has to be rebuilt. And that's where covenantal relationships come in. And he talks about 3 characteristics or things that need to change in order to create organizations of the future. And they tie into the question you asked about leadership. So fundamentally, the first change is we need to move to self-managing teams. So what does that mean? You have a team of 10 to 12 people that perform a mission or a purpose together to deliver a product or a service. And the team is autonomous, and therefore decisions are made by people in that team. So whereas in business at the moment, we have hierarchies where people make decisions and tell their subordinates what to do, I don't. So I normally get it wrong. So my job is to create an environment where they can make the right decisions. So what you do within a team is you have each individual is responsible for making a specific decision, but they have 2 duties. Lelou calls this the advice process. They need to consult with everybody impacted by that decision and anybody who has advice to offer. Now if anybody's listened to this podcast, this is the key. The key is how are decisions made in society. I think we can all see in this country with Brexit that voting doesn't work, because if you're forcing Theresa May or the civil service to implement something they did not vote for, they haven't got their heart in it. I don't blame them, but it's not fair because they didn't vote for it. They don't believe in it fundamentally, and they're implementing something that they don't believe in. And that, to me, does not result in responsibility because they're being forced to do what they don't necessarily believe is right. So the advice process is not liberal democracy as you see it, and it's not consensus either, because in consensus, one person can block a decision. So what it is, it's about creating responsibility so the person can make the decision, but they have to consult. And they have to consult with the people, but they are responsible. They're making a decision that they believe is right. And that changes everything. So in terms of what servant leadership means is, I don't make decisions. It's scalable. The people within the self-managing teams make those decisions. Now, in terms of support functions like accounts and IT, those can advise the people within the team. They can't tell them what to do. So it's a fundamentally new model. It's not hierarchy, because hierarchy, I think, is dead. Hierarchy is finished. It results in people being forced to do what they don't necessarily want to do. And therefore, with the technology, we don't need hierarchy. We still need accountability and transparency, but without the hierarchy. So to me, that's where the advice process. So that's what servant leadership's about.
Brilliant, thank you. And we're going to kind of create a resource after the whole summit that kind of brings together all these different resources, books, etc., research that people have been mentioning about in the webinar. So we'll definitely add Lou. That sounds brilliant. So I've got a couple more questions. Those of you that are watching live, we've got a few people watching live. If you've got any questions for Philip, now is your time to post them before we come to the end. So do post those in the chat box, and we'll ask Philip in a moment. But Philip, another question I had was that I know you're really passionate about, well, you're leading the way in terms of transforming into a social enterprise, but you're really passionate about encouraging and supporting other businesses to do this as well. What is your advice if anybody's thinking about, changing their family-run business or a privately owned business, into a social enterprise?
Yeah, Lou's very good at this. You need two things to transform an organization. You need a visionary leader, and you need a governance structure that works. So for those of you that are in management but not leading, it's not possible to force change at that level. It just doesn't work, because even at the top it's hard. But so what you need is we need to find visionary leaders, and then we need to create governance structures that work. Because what happens if you don't get the governance structure right is, when you're making this kind of change, you make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And what has been proven many times is, when people have tried to make this change and they make the mistakes, the organization reverts to type. So somebody within the board will blame the person leading the change, and the CEO will be kicked out, and they'll say, let's go, look, this is too risky. Let's go back to a model that we know works. So you have to get both of those criteria. You've got to have a visionary leader and a governance structure that works. Now, as I said earlier, there are loads of leaders who want to do this. And I'm certain that we should be forming groups and connecting to these people. If there's people that are interested in this, connect with me, because there are lots of people. I think I actually believe generally the majority of FTSE directors want to do this. I'm certain about that, but they haven't got the governance structure. They may be the visionary leader, but without the governance structure. So if we can start putting pressure on government to create governance structures that support those leaders, it can happen. So you need those two things: visionary leaders and the governance structure.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant, thank you. And then a slightly different tweak to that question is that I recently heard, and I can't remember where, and it may well have been from you at the Social Enterprise World Forum, but that we actually, there's a really huge opportunity for new social entrepreneurs, so people that want to become a social entrepreneur, that have got creating ideas about what social enterprise to actually set up and start up. And somebody recommended somewhere that I've heard recently that in the UK we've got a lot of baby boomers who are actually coming close to retirement, and maybe their children or their wider family aren't ready or don't want to actually take that business on, and that actually this is a potential opportunity for new startups, new social enterprises, new social entrepreneurs to actually take over those businesses and turn them into social enterprises, because it's actually potentially more likely to be successful in that you've already got a customer base, you're an established business, people know you, And all you're really changing is this into a social mission, a social environmental mission. And I thought that's a brilliant suggestion to the sector or anybody that's interested in starting something new. Rather than starting from scratch, why not buy a business that already exists, or work with the founders and the owners of that business to transform it into exactly what you're talking about, is businesses for the future. What's your
sounds very good. It wasn't me. You didn't get the idea from me.
I can't remember. I always hate not remembering who it was. But.
Again, there are impact funders out there that will back these kind of transactions. The answer is definitely. I think every organisation needs to morph into a social business, and I think, by the way, the state needs to morph into again an organisation focused on society and not purely on money. The state is suffering from the same issue, austerity. It's all about money. It's not about profit in that case, but it's about cost. But we've lost focus on people, and all organisations need to morph. And the idea is sound. Every organisation should either come under new ownership and there's a lot of impact money around. So I'm sure impact funds, you find the right impact, buy a business with a model. I agree with it. It will take too long. I'm very impatient. It's going to take too long to start everything organic. You can't start these large organisations again. So I think the big organisations will morph into social enterprise because they'll have no choice, because their customers will effectively, and their employees will assist in it. But the small organisations where you've got a generational change and the old generation do not want to make the change, I think you're absolutely right that get young people, millennials, excited about transforming it. And let's again work together to work out what are the stages in transforming an organisation. But what I can tell you is it worked. I mean, we're right at the beginning. But the interest from our client base is mind-blowing. So it will happen, and it's a very good idea.
Well, it's very exciting to be talking to you at this very early stage of that process, Philip. So, we do have a couple of questions. One very quick question. Can you remember or can you repeat the name of the book title that you recommended from Fred Lulu?
So Frederick Laloux, Laloux. He's got a website. I think Frederick is Frederic. He's got a website which points at the two books. The original book was called Reinventing Organizations, and that one is good, but a long read. Mm-hmm. He's also got a sound version of the book, and then there's a short version which is about 3.5-4 hour read called The Illustrated Guide to Reinventing Organizations. Both of those are on his website. He's also got a series of videos that he's producing explaining the concept. So the shortest cut is go to his website, Laloux, Reinventing Organizations, and you'll find all you need.
Brilliant, thank you. And one more question. So how can we, and this is Eddie, who's from Make Sense, they've got 35,000 volunteers worldwide in over 150 locations that help solve challenges for social entrepreneurs. How can they help you with your mission? Oh, that's a great question, Eddie.
Look, the key is connect with me. Happy for you to explore possibilities. We need to create a movement, a coalition to make the changes that are needed. And there are lots of people with the same ideas, and we all need to use our networks. So let's. There was an article that was published about me in the Sunday Times, and that flashed out a lot of people who are all like-minded. So I think we all need to work together. Every single one of us can have an impact. You don't have to be a CEO or chief energizer to have an impact. Every person can have an impact on the people they interact with and can change the world for those people. So the key is to network, to if there's 35,000 people, imagine if you add in their own networks, how much impact that can have. So the key is connect with me and let's start to form a movement, which we hope to get involved in over the next few months. And together we can start to trigger the change.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'd absolutely encourage anybody that's watching this or any of the other webinars as part of this summit that we continue the conversation on social media, through emails, reach out, make the contact with me, with other people on the webinars, use the hashtag, speak to Philip and any of the other speakers, because they're all open to continuing this conversation. So I really do encourage you to take that step and kind of reach out and have that conversation with us. I'm sure we'd all appreciate that. Okay, I don't think there's any other questions. My final question, which I'm asking all of the guest speakers, is, which I think we've already really heard from you, Philip, but I'll ask it anyway, is what kind of hope do you have for the enterprise sector and the sector as a whole going forward, and why do you think social entrepreneurship is the way forward? 2 questions.
Yeah, as I've mentioned, I think data exchange has changed, and capitalism in its current form simply doesn't work. So in my view, I can't tell you how long it's going to happen, but I think every single organization will become a social organization. It's happening in France. It's not, I don't have to guess, he's done it. He's actually said every business will have to have a social mission. So it will happen here, and it won't be a small peripheral sector, it will be the marketplace. And I'm certain about that, because the millennials will make sure that this happens. Yeah. So to me, it's not peripheral or a niche market. Every single business will become a social enterprise. I'm certain about that. And it will change the world. And I've been reading Donut Economics by, I forget who's written it again. And to me, we talk about the AI and what it's going to do for the job market. I think we're missing a lot of key information. First of all, at the moment, we're not looking after people in the health service. The huge numbers of jobs. We're not dealing with mental health. We're not educating people. There's huge numbers of jobs we're not doing effectively. And also the circular economy. And this is something that I think the UK and America should bear in mind. We have to redesign manufacturing businesses to protect the environment, which means forget about China and they're actually at a disadvantage because they've designed their manufacturing processes for a linear economy and not a circular economy. Think about the opportunities of bringing manufacturing back to the UK and the US by redesigning it around the circular economy. And once we do that, if you process smartphones, there's a lot of manual work involved with dismantling them. There's huge amounts of work involved. So I think we're missing. The opportunities are huge if we take into account that the mission of a business is to look after people and to protect the environment.
No, absolutely. And we were having that similar conversation yesterday with Cressida Wesling and Melvis and Cress about the circular economy, and also this, belief exactly shared by you and myself that there isn't really any other option in my mind for business or the economy or society. We have to be moving towards social entrepreneurship, social missions, considering the circular economy and implementing more sustainable processes in business, because there isn't another option. We only, there is a finite amount of time. So
absolutely, we've tried statism between 1945 and 1975. That didn't work. It's just not good enough for innovation. We then have tried capitalism between 75 and now, and that's not distributing effectively. It's resulting in an unfair inequalities of both health and wealth and money. And as you say, we're stuck in a rut. And the only solution is for all of us to recognise that we have two aspects of our nature. We're both competitive and we are all social beings. And we've allowed the competitive command and control bit of ourselves to crush the social being. And what needs to happen is that social being needs to be revived. And we've all got that being. And it's waiting to come out. I think that's going to happen.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this afternoon, Philip. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to join the webinar, to join the summit and speak to everybody here that's been watching live and those that are watching on the replay. Hopefully we can continue the conversation and keep in touch. But yeah, thank you very, very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Kat.
Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.